Traveling the Vortex. Side Trip.
Wichita been for you?
Lovely so far. I got here. I landed in Chicago on Monday and took the train here from Chicago to Newton and then the bus. So I've been here a couple of days actually.
Is this your first time to Kansas?
Oh yes. First time to Kansas. Yes.
What do you think of it?
Well, I'm liking it so far. Yeah, no, I like Wichita. So I like that. I took that little trolley thing downtown, and I found a couple of quite good bookshops, and that was nice. I just went this afternoon and had a peer at the Native American Keeper of the Plains. Yes, that's beautiful. Actually, that's a beautiful sculpture. I love it, and I love the sculptures of people standing in the streets.
Oh yeah.
Those are real people, they just froze there.
Yeah, there's frozen. Yes.
They got stuck in Wichita too long.
Yeah. But so no, I'm liking it. I think it's a good vibe. I like it, Wichita. Yes.
So you came to tell us a little bit how you came to Doctor Who. Because obviously you started with the Fourth Doctor.
I started.
Did you audition? How did you?
Well, yes, I had done another program for the BBC, and but before then I was actually working at the BBC as a clerk, which I did for about 2 months, and it was actually involved cutting up newspapers. It was a very boring job. It involved cutting up newspapers for the BBC News archive. Literally, the person in charge would go through the Times and the Telegraph and all the other serious papers, mark the articles, and suggest a particular file for them. And if there was some enormously important story, like if Mrs. Thatcher met Ronald Reagan in Japan, then they'd probably have 3 copies of the article, one for the Reagan file, one for Thatcher, one except Reagan wasn't even in power yet, was he? Whoever it was, and one for Japan. So this is all before computers and that. So even one of the biggest news organisations in the world, as the BBC was, they kept information literally in little sort of manila folders in file drawers. So I was employed about 2 months to cut up these newspapers. But I liked it because it was glamorous, because of course working for the BBC, so you could tell your friend, oh, you're working for the BBC. You don't tell him you're cutting up newspapers all day, because you just make it sound really quite glamorous. But there was an article in it, just a little article on a gossip page in one of the papers about the fact that they were looking for Doctor Who was looking for a sort of Artful Dodger type character. And one of the people who worked there said, oh, Matthew, look at this, you should you should try and get into that. And I thought, oh my God, I could do that. And so I told the casting director, who had already cast me in this, to serve them on my days. We hadn't started making it yet, but I was already cast in that. I said, oh my God, I want to be in, well, this is perfect, I'm absolutely perfect for it. Artful Dodger, what could be more perfect? So she put me up for it, and then John Nathan Turner called me in to meet, and I was amazed. It was just fantastic, and we read a little piece written by Christopher Bidmead, almost none of which I remember, except that the Doctor makes a comment about Peking duck. Peking duck not being duck, it's chicken. Or is it the other duck, the other sort of Chinese duck? Is it Peking duck? Yeah, Peking duck. Peking duck's fish, not chicken. Right. Yeah, sorry, it's Peking duck is fish, not duck. What am I talking about? So anyway, the Doctor said, well, the situation's a bit like Peking duck, isn't it? And Adric said, oh, what's that? What does that mean? He says, well, it means it's not duck. Peking duck isn't duck, is it? It's fish. So, oh, yes. So then John grilled me about whether I understood the subtlety of that scene. And I said, oh, yes, I understand it, absolutely. You're saying that it's not what it appears to be. And he said, you're clever. So he brought me back. He brought me back for a second meeting with Chris Bidmead and Peter Moffat, the director, the man who directed State of Decay. And then the next day he phoned and said, oh, you're so fabulous, you want to be in Doctor Who? I said, well, all right. Well, I'll think about it. Can I have 24 hours to think about it? But it was fantastic. It was just amazing. But yeah, it's like a lot of these life-changing things for people. They happen just really fast. So they are completely unexpected. So one minute I'm just, I don't know what I'm going to do after so many days. And then suddenly I'm put into this fantastic program. It was just amazing.
Had you always wanted to be an actor?
Yes.
I read somewhere you were fan of Doctor Who, and you'd even had something published in Doctor Who Weekly.
Oh, don't, that's so embarrassing. Yeah, that's dreadful. No, yes.
I have a copy.
Oh, no, don't, no. Yeah. No, that is the most embarrassing thing in the world. Yes, I did have a letter. It's a dreadfully pompous letter. The sort of letter that teenagers write when they're in a pompous frame of mind. It's dreadful. It's so embarrassing. Of course, I was all excited when it was published. That's the thing is, oh, Dad, I've been published in the Doctor Who comic. And but about a few months later, it was just about the most embarrassing thing that had ever happened to me. And I wished I'd never written that wretched letter. Of course, Peter Capaldi wrote a letter to I think, the Radio Times, didn't he? Yes. Which is even more embarrassing, I think. But yes, I did. To my everlasting embarrassment, I did have a letter published in that dreadful magazine. Yes. So yeah, but yeah, partly I was the first enthusiast to be in the series because I was the first person for whom that was possible generationally. I mean, Elizabeth Slade was already 12 when Doctor Who started. What did she care? It wasn't exciting to her. And Tom and Patrick, they didn't care in that sense because they were grown-ups when it started. I was the first one young enough to have been exposed to it as a very young child and to have seen the TARDIS and had the impression of that extraordinary set when I was 4 years old or 5 years old or whatever it was. So that whole sort of chemical reaction that occurred, I was the first actor for whom that could be true, but just because of the generational thing.
Do you remember what your first episode you ever saw was?
The first episode I remember quite clearly was actually it's not a very good one. It's The Space Pirates. But I think I'm almost certain had seen some earlier. I think I must have done. But that's one for some reason I remember vividly, even though there's actually nothing memorable about it. That's an odd one. Though it is very important in that it's Robert Holmes' first ever story. Nobody ever thought from The Space Pirates he would turn into the sort of uber Doctor Who writer. But for some reason I've always remembered that. And of course the Cybermen in the Sewers everybody remembers vividly. So mid-late Patrick, I suppose.
Did it change your perception of the show, going from being somebody that watched Doctor Who to somebody on the show? Was there any sort of a world-changing perception for you that you were like, well, this maybe isn't as grand as I think it is? Or were you generally excited as you were?
I was generally excited. The script, the first script we recorded wasn't the first one actually broadcast. The first one we made was State of Decay, Terence Dix's vampire one, which is a story I still love. And it was thrilling when the script arrived. It was every bit as exciting as I thought it would. And in the end, Doctor Who it's a wonderful thing, but it has its limitations. It isn't an unlimited thing. It does have limitations, and there is some frustration. I think every Doctor Who companion has found the tropes of the Doctor Who companion frustrating in some ways because they are so limited. In some ways, they're very passive. They're also much more difficult to play than the Doctor, of course, because that sort of know-all acting is actually quite easy to do. The guy stalks about the place, the Sherlock Holmes type, stalking about the place, knowing everything. That's actually the easiest kind of thing to do, whereas the sort of Watson-type character, the more passive character, in some ways is actually more difficult to catch. People who don't act for a living don't quite understand that, but it's generally true. So that's, if you ask Louise Jameson or just anybody will say that they had grumpy days about the way their character was written. But that's a minor thing because on the whole, of course, for me it was overwhelmingly exciting and also has to be said terrifying. It was absolutely petrifying. But a very vivid and intense experience throughout.
How much pressure was that? You were the youngest companion to date, well, up until Amelia Pond took over, but you were the youngest actor cast as a companion in Doctor Who. At that age, that had to be an amazing pressure cooker for you to be in there. Even at the time frame that the show was in, obviously the height of its popularity, and Tom was, all over the world, and for you to come into that had to be... It
was odd because British actors aren't... In those days, British actors weren't really stars, and they weren't paid an enormous amount of money, so it wasn't glamorous at all. In the way people imagine Hollywood is. Actually, I think Hollywood's completely unglamorous, but people have a perception of it. But working at the BBC wasn't like that. You weren't treated as something kind of starry and fabulous at all, particularly when you were really, really young. It was frightening and tense, but we rehearsed quite a lot. It wasn't that we just... nowadays, a lot of television is done off the top of the head, basically. You learn the lines, you turn up. It's quite possible now, if you're doing a guest shot in Doctor Who now, but you don't have a scene with the Doctor, it's quite a strong chance you won't ever meet the Doctor. Whereas we were a Doctor Who story in those days. We were like a rep company for a month. We were a group for a month. And my first one, Peter Moffat was a very caring, he was very sweet and generous and as helpful as he could be. But there was other tensions because Tom, who I adore, is also very famously a difficult man. He's not an easy person to work around, and I found that really quite intimidating. He's just not very easy. And of course he had the thing going on with Lalla Ward, which was also not conducive to jollity, it has to be said.
So how'd the atmosphere on the set change once Lalla left?
Oh, completely. God bless her, it's not her fault, but that the relationship between them was, unbelievably awful. And then shortly after she left, they announced that they were going to get married. Peter Moffat, the director, telephoned and said, "For God's sake, don't do it. It's a disaster." I said, "Oh no, we're so in love." "No, don't." But they did. It didn't go very well, as we all know. Poor
I
love.
had a story called Romanus First. The untold Adric who wrote on a love affair.
Poor Romana. Yes. No, so it was completely, yes, it was much more relaxed. But, Lala's all right, but, and in some ways it was the two of them. It wasn't particularly her or him, it was just the two of them together. And of course sometimes they were jolly and sweet, but often they weren't. And there's all these years later, there's no point in pretending that was easy. It was an easy atmosphere to work in. And I love the Keeper of Traken as a story. Anyway, I think it's a gorgeous piece. I love everything about it. I love the sets and the cast and the writer. I love everything about it, and the master and all that. But also it was a happy production, and that makes a difference. You think fondly of it when the production is happy. Whereas the East Space trilogy was made in quite a tense atmosphere, to be honest. But I think it comes out great. I actually love them. Stage Decay is possibly my favourite of the ones I was in. Well, I don't know. There are one or two others as well, but I do absolutely love it. And Warrior's Gate, of course, is an amazing thing. That's really brave. Children's /family TV doing something like that. I think it's just extraordinary. Stephen Gallagher's an amazing writer.
I suppose the Adric's characters, the way you perform is a little different in State of Decay than it is in anything else. I would assume that, there's slight variations on it. I would assume that's because of the shooting order. They kind of changed the character of Adric as they went, and the shooting order, and then, of course, the broadcast order of State of Decay maybe makes it a little more obvious that...
State of Decay was... There was a State of Decay was written by Terence Dix, who had a little one-page description of the character. And he thought he was basically writing an Artful Dodger. That's what basically... I think it's only about 5 or 6 lines. So he was working... That's all he had. And Andrew Smith, who wrote Full Circle, and who I see still, we're friends, and I work with him. He writes for Big Finish as well, Andrew. So I see him occasionally and still work with him as well. But Andrew's vision is entirely different. Yeah, Terence was just writing from this little sort of 200-word summary. So they do feel very different. And I actually said this. I said to Chris Bidmead when Full Circle arrived. I actually said, this doesn't feel the same. Texture's just not the same. And he said, "Oh, don't you worry about it, dear boy." And of course, when you're very young, you don't want to be too big-mouthed about it. You don't want to, if I was 30, I would say, "Look, Christopher, can we talk about this? I don't think this feels quite the same." But when you're really 18 and you're shy anyway, you say, "Look, Christopher, I don't think it's quite the same." And he says, "Don't you worry about it, little boy." So then you just say, "Oh, all right, well, he knows what he's doing, I don't." So, so you just let it go.
Do you think it was easier for fans of the show to connect with Adric because he obviously was closer to their age than many of the companions that had come before?
Yes, he was definitely designed for 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds. Yeah, John had this sort of strata of things, a strata of characters to appeal to different facets of the audience. And he was designed for... Because Doctor Who was... it's easy to forget that we are talking about a programme that was, in many ways, children's television, albeit it was other things as well. And he was definitely there for children. That was his intention. And in identification in television, there's always the theory that, as far as it is identification, I'm not entirely sure that's what it's about, but to some extent, the identifier character is always older than the viewers who are supposed to identify with it. So a 15-year-old character is designed to appeal to 9-year-olds. A 20-year-old character is designed to appeal to 14, 15-year-olds. It's a general thing in television that the identifier thing is actually an age gap. Which I sort of think is true. Though I'm not sure that I buy the identifier thing myself anyway with Doctor Who, because the truth is, everybody fancies that they're the Doctor. Everybody stalks it. I was on a panel with the wonderful Philip Hinchcliffe, the producer of Tom's first 3 years, and he was saying, he was talking to a girl, a young, an 8-year-old girl or something about Doctor Who, and she said, so when you watch Doctor Who, do you still imagine that you're Sarah Jane Smith? He said, oh no, I imagine I'm the Doctor. So he said, so whatever your sex, the one you actually, in inverted commas, identify with is in fact the Doctor. Which makes it more interesting for the companions. If the companions aren't there just to represent the audience, then they can have their own life, their own perspective. They don't have to, in inverted commas, be the audience. I think there's definitely an idea that companions are there for identification, but I've never entirely bought it. I agree with that girl. And when I was a kid, I thought I was Doctor Who. I never thought... I love Joe. I love, Brady Lethbridge Stewart and Jamie and I love all of them. But I never sat there and thought... When I was playing Doctor Who in the playground when I was 7 years old, trust me, I wasn't Jamie. One of my less brilliant friends had to be Jamie. I was the Doctor. Though the trouble with that, actually playing Doctor Who in the playground when I was about 7 years old, was, of course, other kids want to be the Doctor as well. So we actually did a sort of 3 Doctors thing long before they did it on TV. because none of us wanted to be Jamie. We all wanted to be the Doctor. And I sure as hell wasn't going to be Jamie. I was going to be the Doctor. So it's the Doctor that people fantasize about, which, of course, says that we're all ginormous egomaniacs because we're identifying with the cleverest man in the universe. And it never crosses our mind when we're 8 years old that perhaps we're not the cleverest man in the universe.
I'm almost more curious to ask if Fraser Hines has heard that story.
Yes, I think he has. Yes, I'm sure. Probably several times, yes.
So you then also stayed on the show and stuck around with Peter Davison. What was that transition like with the lead
Which
actor?
again, if you're a Doctor Who kid, if that's your thing, and it was my thing, it is just one of the ginormous things. Being in a regeneration scene, I was in 2, by the way. Not many people can say that. It's just an amazing thing. It's just an amazing, exciting thing to be in this absolutely key thing in the history of Doctor Who. Is these every 3 years or whatever it is, somebody collapses and turns into somebody entirely different. And it's really exciting to be a part of it, if you happen to know the programme. And it was always fascinating, because the vision mixer that I was working with, one of them, was the woman who had done the vision mixing for Hart and Linda Troughton. She was still at the BBC and still doing Doctor Who occasionally. So I was really impressed by her. With her, it was nothing. She didn't care. It was just a day at the BBC among thousands of other days. But I said, did you direct that? Did you vision mix that blurry bit from William Hartman about the drown? I said, oh yeah, I think I did, dear. Yeah. So I love that, and I love that. I mean, I think Peter into Colin is still the greatest regeneration scene. I think it's absolutely sublime. It's beautifully done, directed by what's that extraordinary, Graham Harper. And I love it, and the floating heads, and of course that Peter's last line is my name. Of course I like that. And then Colin sitting up and saying, what's his line? His very famous line. I can't. Change, my dear, whether you like it or not. Yeah. So it's those regenerations they're fantastic to be in. Yes.
When you left after Earthshock, did you ever think you'd come back for that regeneration scene?
No, it didn't cross my mind. I was thrilled to come back and do it. at like 5 to... We used to record in the evenings. We used to have dinner and then record, I think, from 7 to 10:30. And that was done at like 10:29. All, me, Sarah, Janet, Mark, were all just standing there in front of a little camera 1 minute before they turned the lights on. It was a... I mean, I believe in unions, but the BBC was a very union-ridden place, and frankly, at 10:30, those lights went on. Unless you had to negotiate. If you wanted to go on for another 15 minutes, you actually had to negotiate. You had to say, look, we've got to get this finished. Please give us another 15 minutes. Then, somebody had to come down on the floor and discuss it with a representative and everything. So it was all. So that 25 past 10, if things weren't going very well, was quite a tense time. If we had to go into overtime, it was quite a big sort of, will they let us or won't they? Will they switch those lights on? So 10:29 on that day, we were doing that regeneration scene.
Now, the little bit that you did for Time Flight, did you record that around the same time you were shooting?
No, I came back for it.
You came
no,
back
I actually came back for it.
Yeah. So I had read somewhere that was more... Jonathan Nathan Turner wanted that done specifically so that when the Radio Times cast list came out, people weren't aware that your character was going to die.
That's absolutely right. He loved Nathan Turner, whose work on Doctor Who is absolutely brilliant, and certainly the time that I was in it, those 2 years I know there was unfortunate difficulties later on, and a lot of that I think was blown up by people at the BBC who are hostile to it, and I still think that Colin's period is much better than it's sort of it was fashionable to say, and there was a lot and I think Nathan Turner was really badly treated by the BBC, to be honest. But it has to be said that the time I was around, he was everybody adored him. They thought he had saved Doctor Who, and it was widely felt that he had done a brilliant job. And the Davison thing was thought to be brilliant, and it was really successful. It really, really worked, and it really went down well. But he was really good at surprise. He wanted surprises to be real. Of course, it's now with the world of the internet, it's virtually impossible to surprise anyone about anything. But I think I might have said this yesterday, but the Radio Times got in touch with him and said, "Oh, you're bringing the Cybermen back. Can we do a Cybermen cover?" Most producers would say yes. Having a cover of the Radio Times was a big deal. It's like here, being on the cover of TV Guide is a big thing, and it's really to his credit that he said no. He said, I don't want anybody to know the Cybermen are coming back. I want them to watch the episode and then fall off their chairs in the last 30 seconds of the first episode of Earthshock. He loved that kind of thing. And so the same thing with Adric. Yeah, he didn't want any suspicion of what was going to happen because he wanted to create this particular, unique, one-off moment. I've just written some sleeve notes about Earthshock for a new DVD release of it in Europe. He asked me to write, booklet notes, I suppose. So I've seen it recently, and so I've given it a bit of thought. And the thing about it is a completely it's one of those things that is now, in a sense, an entirely different piece. Because when people watch, if they buy the DVD and there's a Cyberman on the box, and they almost certainly know that it's a story in which a companion dies, it's very difficult now not to know that. You're watching a different thing. That unique moment when you didn't know the Cybermen would come back, you didn't know the boy was going to die. That was a thing of that moment, completely unique and unrepeatable. But it's to his credit that he loved that kind of thing and managed it really well.
When were you informed that Adric's character was going to the demise of the character?
Well, I knew that was my last story because I'd done pretty much 2 years. And it's a fairly standard run, and Earthshock was a contract renewal. So my contract had expired, and they said, "Will you come back and do another one?" So I knew that final contract was for one more story. So I knew I was leaving. But actually, I found out about the death much earlier than I was supposed to, because Peter, he had to be walking about with a sort of early sample of the script for the final episode of Earthshock. So we were sitting in the coffee shop up on the top floor of the Acton Hilton, where we used to rehearse in London. And he was sitting and I was drinking a cup of coffee, and Sarah's and Janet, and there's this script. I said, "Oh, that looks interesting." I owned it, so I actually read it. Like weeks and weeks, may even have been a couple of months before I was supposed to know. So this thing I was not supposed to know about, I knew about. And Eric, when Eric Saywood does panels, he said, "Well, of course, Matthew didn't know until the last moment." Oh yeah, I did. I'd read the script months before I was supposed to. So I knew.
Pretend you didn't know?
No, I don't think I pretended exactly. I don't. That's a good question, actually. I don't think. I like your little hat.
Like you did
Yes, I'm wondering, did I act like I didn't know? No, I don't think I acted like I didn't know. But then I didn't rush about the place telling everybody. So it's somewhere between the two, I suppose.
How did that phase you to know that, obviously you knew you were leaving, but then to find out that, oh, we've gone one step further?
Well, that's an interesting thing, because again, that I had a number of feelings about it. One of which that it's amazing, that it's a new thing. They'd never done it before. And again, just we're talking about regenerations. It's exciting to do something with Doctor Who that just nobody had ever done before, and that felt really significant and important and memorable. So in that sense, it was really exciting and amazing, and I had no objection to it from that way. But it's also kind of upsetting. A character you've lived with for a long time, who's also very young, acting his death scene, is quite a melancholy feeling. The wonderful head cameraman, who I've been in touch, he died a couple of years ago, but we were all in touch with him recently. He always remembered, he loved Doctor Who. He worked on Doctor Who right through the 80s. So I think he started with Tom's Last Scene, went, I think, right to the end of Sylve. I wish I could remember his name. I feel awful that I can't. Lovely man, anyway. But he always remembered that as the saddest day on the series. And he said everybody did. He said the atmosphere in the studio was so sad and melancholy. Because, we knew it's the death of a character, but also it's the loss of an actor that, we had got to know each other, and we were, so the atmosphere was a really quite sad atmosphere, and he discussed that with me many years later, and how he always remembered it, and how everybody in the studio felt that way.
You actually provided me with a double whammy, because growing up here in the States in the Midwest, we got Doctor Who on our public television channels, frequently out of order, and we had a lot of Tom Baker. So I would watch Tom Baker. He was my first Doctor. He was the one I grew up with. I had no concept about how the show worked. And then he fell off this tower and died. And this skinny blonde guy sits up. And I sat up and went, what is this? I had no clue that it was going to continue on and be a thing. And the companions were all, okay. Like, none of you were really certain what to make of it. And so the follow-up episode, where you're dealing with all of the confusion, I was just as confused as the rest of you were. And I was a little angry at you specifically, because it's like, Adric's the smart one. If Adric doesn't know how to feel about this, I don't know how to feel about this. And I actually tuned out for a little while and came back to it years later, and then you died. And you want to talk that somber moment, because I had just kind of forgiven you. And I'd kind of gotten to know you again through these other adventures. And then you went and left again in such a horrible manner.
Yes, it's interesting about regeneration. People do tend to be quite calm. In real life, if somebody fell on the floor and turned into a completely other person, you'd be kind of flabbergasted. But everybody after regeneration thinks, well, that's a bit strange. The Doctor's fallen on the floor. He used to have long silver hair, and suddenly he's got a flute all of a sudden. That's a bit strange, isn't it? Oh, that's weird. Anyway, Doctor, we'd better go and have an adventure. It was always very like that. I remember in Spearhead of Space, which is a story I really loved, and Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart saying, oh, no, that chap's not the Doctor, and can't possibly be. Oh, and then I think John said something that he sort of, oh yes, you're that Lethbridge Stewart fellow, aren't you? He said, well, Doctor, all right then, you're the Doctor, you're much taller than you used to be, and I see you've got a little tattoo on your arm, but then you're entirely different, but nonetheless, yeah, okay, the Doctor, all right, oh well, come and work for UNIT then. But the trouble is, if you're going to dwell on it rather. There's never a right moment when
live this long.
I'm saying very interesting stuff about regeneration.
I know, and I thought, shall I just go?
Hello, sweetie.
Hello, Charlie.
Hello.
Ladies and gentlemen, Katy Manning.
Anyway, thank God I can shut up now.
No, but
In fact, we're getting near those free 5:30 is free drinks up in that mezzanine.
and thanks to who?
Yeah, I'm getting 6 free drinks because I've got her card as well.
Because I don't drink.
She doesn't drink.
So
lovely.
there's no accounting for my behaviour, darling. Alcohol doesn't do it, even though I do tell the story of when I did a convention and, oh, look at his cute little leggies poking out of his little shorties. Sorry, I find men in shorts quite riveting. I don't get out much. But I did a convention in America, and I think I'm there now, aren't I?
I think
It's the same one.
Yes. It's Kansas.
How many
America.
years have I been
Okay.
here? Anyway, I'd done this whole thing, and they came and they said, Katy, oh, you're so funny. And, they said, if you have a few drinks before you go on, don't you? I went, no, I don't drink. They said, no. You must. Nobody can behave like that without alcohol. And it was at that moment I realized I do have problems. Anyway, no, I thought that I'd leave it a bit later so that you could actually make some sense and have a lovely chat, because you're a very interesting and adorable man. And it gave me a few minutes to recover from Wild Times adventures. And, of course, as you know, I'm not frightfully well at the moment. So I just thought I'd come and have a little bit of time with you and then leave you to be interesting again.
Oh, thank you.
I love him.
Well, I love her.
We just keep saying, why can't we work together?
I know. I want to.
I'm working with all these different people and Osgood and all, and all these things we do at Big Finish, which aren't even Doctor Who, but never he and I together. And I think we should.
So do I.
Yeah, I think everybody should.
Well, I want to play Irish Wild Time's wilder brother.
Well, this is it. Because otherwise we go out as Jadrick.
Jadrick.
But I think it would be
Aren't they an Irish pop group?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
But I thought it'd be really nice if we did something, as you say, with Iris Wild Time. And because Iris has all sorts of different dalliances, and as
she?
you say, to have this sort of wild whack. Oh yes, oh she's had all sorts of flings around, including Father Christmas, darling.
Wow, how was
Yay!
that?
How
Wow.
was that for being a very naughty CD?
Ho ho ho!
Yes, that's roughly what was said to her. She'd found out that Mother Christmas had been with Panda. Oh. This is the world you're getting yourself into.
Yes.
Anyway,
I
know.
Yeah.
If you want to ask something sensible.
No, talk about Big Finish, because that's really kind of been the chance for you guys to get back involved.
Oh, yes, we love it. We love it. Some of us were quite fast about doing it, like Peter and Sarah. Some of us were a bit slow about doing it because we thought it wasn't going to be very good. But then we did something else. We did Dark Shadows for them. We thought it was so... I'm speaking fast because I know you've all heard this before. So I did Dark Shadows. I thought the script is fantastic. So I think I'll do Doctor Who as well. So I got in touch with them and said, I'll do Doctor Who. And now I can't stop doing Doctor Who. I'm doing Doctor Who all the time. I'm always sitting around either doing one or waiting for the next script or waiting for the next date. It's so fabulous. We love it. And it's interesting because we were talking, weren't we, about the effect of regeneration on characters and the fact that they don't really care. I did actually a very good one called Psychodrome, which does explore how characters react to the regeneration. And Adric doesn't react very well to the Fifth Doctor because he adores the Fourth Doctor, and they've become very close. Have that master-pupil
I
relationship.
didn't know all this was going on.
Yes. And yeah, anyway, that's enough of that. But anyway, it's called Psychodrome. But it does explore the very issue you were bringing up about 5 minutes ago. So I thought I would just plug that.
I'll just say, like you, David Richardson was constantly, and I said, no, why would I do it without John? You know, that's pointless. And I did the first one, which I'll be honest with you, I didn't understand at all. Right, the Doll of Death, and I thought, you know. Anyway, I then went on to do more. And like you, I began to really enjoy, because I also didn't think I could do young Joe anymore, because I was playing John, the Brig, everybody else, because there was nobody there. And so I was playing everybody, and I got very used to that. So, of course, when Tim Treloar came in, currently, I kept going to speak the Doctor's lines, you know. But also, the great thing that we're saying about Big Finish. You know, I've done Dorian Gray, I've done Torchwood, where I play the most fabulous evil person. I love that. And I've done, what else, Dracula, and various Bavarian people, including a nun.
Who were you in Dracula?
I played the Bavarian bar lady, or innkeeper, and the nun that takes them on this little...
Oh, how fabulous.
Oh,
Such
yeah.
good casting.
And, you know, and then I got to record my own play for them. And I've just done, and then, you know, we got the wonderful one, The Scorchies, where I get to sing. And nobody believed it was me. They kept saying, oh, was that, you know, the other Melvin Hayes doing it? I said, no, I sung Cool Cat and the Murderous Mices, and I played Joe, and I did Mr. Cleverman. You know, because Cool Cat was very, Joe is making a thing. He's got lights that flash and go beam. And, you know, we had to, it was wonderful. And then went on to do, obviously now I'm working with New Unit. He's so riveted, he just opened his eyes. No, he's painted eyes. You've painted eyeballs on your eyelids, haven't you, to look like you're interested.
I can listen to you. It doesn't matter.
And so now, of course, I'm coming back as Joe Jones, which is terrific. But the only person I need to come back with and do something with, whatever it is my friend Edric.
Yes.
Did either of you think that years down the line, when you were doing this,
No.
this is probably an obvious question, but was there any did you even imagine you revisiting
Can I
these
say one
characters?
thing, though? When, after John, which is when, and I'm only going to say this because you guys were a lot later. I'm so much older. And when we went into it, just literally had been put into a different time. We had proper army and navy, and no longer those sort of banana republic people in safari suits and paper badges. You know, it moved up. You know, they'd also were working with special effects, because you lot don't remember that computers then were a room this big. You know, which is very hard. And we also brought in the master, and we brought in, you know, new aspects to the show.
Color?
And it started to lift, which is why they were recasting from the wonderful, you know, she was absolutely brilliant, but they needed someone with the Doctor who wasn't an equal. And anyway, so Barry Letts made all these changes, and he wanted to start bringing it into having younger people. You never lose the fact that it was a children's show, and it must never lose that element. When it loses that, it's very sad, because that is, you know, one of the great gifts of the show, that it is for the family. And then we started to get teenagers. And then I don't know whether the miniskirts had anything to do with it, but the daddies started watching. And it came on just after the football. So it was kind of the family were gathered. And we got into about the third, and the figures were right the top, the biggest they'd ever been. And they found out it was 75% adult viewing, i.e. over the age of, I guess, about 10 or something. And so it has started to become a cult. But that didn't indicate to us that it was going to be, you know, one day you're going to be a plastic figurine, and you're going to, you know, be able to lick the back of my head on a sheet of stamps, and, you know, all these terribly exciting things, and we're going to be video games. You know, there was no inkling back then. And then when Tom came into it, so we'd already hit the highest viewing rates, and you knew it was cult because, you know, when you were travelling around, suddenly everybody wanted to say g'day. And then when Tom came in, it went to its next high. And, you know, I think after then you started to know that you were in a, not necessarily what we have now, but you knew you were in a very successful television show. So I think, you know, that was, we kind of were in that curve of glory of watching it just get there. And, you know, we arrived in a helicopter one day in a field, and there's all these people, and they're getting very excited and screaming. And I said to John, what have we done wrong? They can't all be extras, you know, bailing from. And he said, no, dear girl, he said, I think they're called fans. You know, so That's how my take on it. And no, you would never in a pink fit. But the great thing is, I now have got something to leave my children. I can now leave them 3 plastic figurines, a sheet of stamps, 2 video games, and a cut-out paper dolly dress-up Joe.
Which, that's the best. Cut-out dolly
Do you know how lucky are my kids? 50 years an actress, that's what they get.
Actually, it's more than the children of most actresses get.
So now I pass the question over.
What was the question? I completely lost track
Just-
of. What planet are we on?
Did you even conceive that it would become what it is today?
No, well, the thing about it was that I never thought it would be stopped. So I thought what is now called Classic Who would just still be going. I was amazed when they stopped making it. It seemed to me ridiculous. So in a sense, I thought it would go on forever. What I never thought was that people would be watching the old episodes because when we were in it, I think VHS was just beginning. But because of the contract equity had with the BBC, the theory was that negotiating to put BBC material on VHS would have been a nightmare. It would have been virtually impossible to do. And in fact, it's one of the reasons why it took years and years for any BBC stuff to appear on VHS, because the contracts were so complicated.
But they do look, I have to say here that we are very well looked after by the BBC.
Oh, yeah, I'm not complaining about
No,
BBC,
but
yeah.
so that
Oh, we
people
are.
know, the BBC they have been very honourable, because when you look at how many years ago I was in it, and I am still, every single thing, there are things that the BBC said there's so much out there now, and because of, the internet and so on, there are things that we lose. But basically, our contracts were absolutely watertight and brilliant.
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely agree with that.
And did
But-
you really believe, did you honestly believe that it would not stop?
Well, yeah, it
Didn't
had been
you-
on all my life, so I assumed it would probably go on
Didn't
throughout
you
my
feel that it
lifetime.
maybe sometimes things need to stop to...
Oh, yeah, but not Doctor Who. Some things need to stop.
Now, you see, I only bringing this up because, now we can have the conversation about it. I'm probably going to say something you're all going to be struck horror with. Yes, it could have gone on. Could have gone on just, zoom, plattling along. Everybody was brilliant in it. There was no weak links in it. I might have had a few things about certain production people. I won't mention any names, who I thought occasionally let it down a little bit, teensy bit from what I saw. But it was still as brilliant and as wonderful and as remarkable. But I just believe that to have the quality that Russell T Davies brought back, it would have had to have stopped to have gone there. And I think it's the greatest thing they did was actually stop it and wait for this remarkable man who has, and everybody who's produced it is absolutely passionate about Doctor Who. And you can see that love. And, there's never been one Doctor from beginning to now that I don't think has been a superb performance.
No, I agree with that.
And I don't think we'd have what we have now, in all honesty, if it hadn't sort of just... And it was beginning to do things that made the BBC, rightly or wrongly, say, maybe we'll let it rest. And that I just thought I'd share that with you.
Yeah, that's very reasonable. Very
Because,
reasonable point of view,
but it is, after all, only an opinion. There ain't no facts.
No.
It'd be very interesting to know if it had gone on, would it have lasted or would it have fizzled out?
You're probably right. In the end, it probably would have fizzled out, because in the end, just about everything fizzles out, doesn't it? You're right. It would probably have fizzled out.
Bye-bye. Fizzling.
Yeah, you're probably right, actually, on reflection.
Do you know what I mean?
I
And
do, I do.
it's looking at it, however big a fan you are, sometimes, you've got to love something enough to let it go and then be sort of rethought, reimagined, because it's too damned good idea to lose the concept. And that's what's so remarkable. They've kept that. And all those little... But like you, who knew that little tiny kiddies would be coming? It was very frightening. There's little ones watching those. It's gorgeous.
Oh, I know, it's amazing. That is one of the weirdest things. You go to events like this, and they watched The Green Death last night. Of course, you probably watched The Green Death, 40 years ago, and I don't know how many times since.
40.
thought it was. But now it's so accessible. People literally, they come and they say, I watched this 35-year-old program last night. And it still seems, really, that's quite
Isn't
a weird
that
kind of-
wonderful?
Oh, it's great. It's quite weird.
I mean, it
like
says so much for, you know, and watching how the program developed over the years, I find just, you know, very fascinating from like going, because I used to watch it obviously with William Hartnell, and then to go from, you know, to Hartnell to Troughton, and then, you know, I'd seen John Pertwee in it with lovely Caroline John and so on and so forth. And then I had to catch up with you guys, because living in America and Australia, you didn't have the wonderful regular, here it is, it's the weekend, who's on, you know. I do feel we're very lucky in England to have that.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And it you know, and no commercials. Yeah. You know, and it, you know.
Well, yeah. If we're going to start ranting, I have to say, BBC America does my head in. They cut into it.
Put it there, buddy. Yeah. How dare they?
It's not only that there are adverts. It's just they cut in completely all the wrong moments, and all of the adverts are so depressing, and they're all for, you know, expensive colleges or antidepressants or things, and then you go back to
the side effects of if you take a hay fever.
Yeah, hay fever. Oh yes.
I
yes.
have hay fever. I now think I'm manic depressive. I have suicidal thoughts. You know, I have developed a tic in my left eye. You know, I was quite well till I came here. Now look at me. I've been down the medical centre. I'm on every drug you can lay your hands on. I daren't read the side effects.
But yeah, and they've got little wobbly bits going on at the bottom of the screen. They're telling you about next week's episode while you're still watching this week's episode. I couldn't bear it. It's unbearable.
Do you know, in England, we used to have a commercial channel. We called it commercial, Dan, because we put commercials on. You call them ads. We call them commercials. And they're not doing it now, but they're still a little better. Australia is like America. You know, you get just to the punchline and they go, and we're down the Windsor Road, and let me do it. And you're going, wait a minute, hang on, he's just about to kiss her. And I'm going down the Windsor Road to look at second-hand cars. You know, don't do this to me. Anyway, they used to do a thing, and you would remember this. They would have like 20 minutes or something, and then it would say, end of part 1. And then the little Tetley tea bag men.
The Tetley tea bag men. Oh, yes.
Yes, right. Yeah. Gave you enough time to go and put kettle on. So you can have a nice cup of tea, you see. And then you hear the little bits of Tetley tea bag music again, or whatever commercials he'd done. And then it says, part 2. So everybody goes back into the sitting room, and you sit down, and you watch. What's wrong with that?
You guys have a very interesting chemistry, and part of the culture of being in Doctor Who is that you have now graduated into the former Doctor Who companions. Even though you're separated by 10 or 15 years between when your various eras were on.
Oh, I thought you were talking about our age. I was going to say, I'll tell you about him.
When you meet at events like this, how much family is that you get to see different actors and Janet Fielding?
It does. It does. It does. It is amazing. Yes, when we're doing Big Finish with Peter, Janet, Sarah, and me, it's absolutely like 35 years ago. It's exactly the same. And then all these lovely actors that I've not worked with. But that I know, you know, Katy and Fraser and Sophie Aldred and Syl.
We all get on.
It's fab.
And we're also at that thing where we get on, but we can also play with and tease each other. There's none of this sort of, you know, Janet will say, because, you know, I'm perfect sort of, you know, punch for, and, you know, we both can, but it's done, it's a kind of a love, it's the characters, it's the kind of friendships you have in life, you know, I mean, it's not, and they are absolutely genuine. You know, there's not one single person who even vaguely gets up my nose. And by God, there's room. No. You know, I think they're all absolutely wonderful. And then all the technical people and, you know, so, and oddly enough, I've just been working with, oh God, my brain. We've just saying, were you close? And I was just going to say, I've just been working with Richard Franklin and John Levine. Now,
Those two.
but I'm sorry, it really is. I'm really battling. But John Levine, I knew when I was living in LA, and he was living here. Richard and I go and have tea together regularly. We've stayed really, really good friends, and it's the first time that we've been back in the studio together, because you guys get to work together a lot, but mine apart from them have all gone. It's only me, that's why I do all the voices. And so that's lovely to have Tim Treloar, who's joined us now. And he saved me. I was locked in the toilet at Big Finish, and he got me out, and then I got all my wires caught around me in my handbag and thing, and so he's become my doctor now. I mean, he's getting me out of really bad space. He broke down the toilet door. He got me out. So the man is now definitely it. But it was lovely having Richard and John there, even though Joe was not a unit soldier. You read about Joe being a spy. She had one ability, darling, and as we've said many, many times, there was just one thing that woman could do, and that was pick locks. Everything else she just did because she was quite smart, actually, and she was funny. So it was quite nice because you working with them and sort of having unit, because we no longer have Nick with us and so on, and so it's very sad really to look at those that I've lost my team. So when I got my two boy buddy, there's lovely pictures on Twitter, and now they're my boys. They're my boys, and it's my homies.
Does it click again? Do you guys, when you get
Darling,
back
you never. I mean, if I don't see you
really.
for you don't unclick within a team, but even seeing you or Janet or Peter, or I often go to functions and Peter's there with Capaldi and all that. We're all buddies. I mean, I had a lovely day with Matt Lucas the other day, who took the worst selfie of us both. We look like we could be babies from the same mother. That's all I need. I look more like Noddle. We both got the same cheeks. So not only are we very friendly in those, but we're very friendly with the new ones. And then every time, as soon as I saw Matthew, my little heart started beating. I knew I was in for a really terrific week. I didn't know I was going to get this sick. But, I knew it was going to be great to hang out with him, because he's wonderful and a lovely actor and a bloody brilliant writer, may I say. So.
Thank you. And I feel the same way about
Buy his book. It's worth it.
It's sold out, actually. We've still got a couple of my novels. You can still purchase a couple of my novels. Unfortunately, Blue Box Boy, none left
And
here.
his novels, I actually like better than anything. I read one of your novels.
Oh, have you? Oh, lovely.
I went out, yeah. I told you I was going to.
Yeah, I didn't know you really would.
I am one of the few people you'll meet who does.
Oh, how lovely. Well,
Because, it's support. And also, I was really nosy. I wanted to know if he was any good. Can we tell them that story before I go? Literally go. About when we first met.
Oh, you mean about Professor...
Do you want to tell it?
Yes, it's quite funny. It's fatal, isn't it, to tell a story by start saying it's quite funny. But yes...
Peter Davidson?
Yes.
I'll tell it.
Hang on, we're talking about Lalla Ward, aren't we? Yeah, so...
Peter Davidson was there.
Was Peter Davidson
Yeah,
there?
Lalla
I don't-
wasn't, thank God.
Lalla wasn't there.
Maybe I'll tell the story.
Yeah, you tell the story. Yeah, you tell the story.
Anyway,
but it's good anyway.
I hadn't met Matthew, and it was a delight to meet him, because, let's face it, what a little cutie. Now and then. You look at the picture now and you go, whoa. Anyway, so and it was the first convention I'd done in America, I think we were, yeah. Because I didn't do a lot for a long time. Especially during the 80s, I did virtually none. Anyway, so it was Peter Davidson, and it was Matthew, who I, had never met before, me. And I'd been out of the country, so I didn't really know what was going on anywhere. And so we were talking, and then someone said something about Lalla Ward, you see, and they said, oh yes, that she had married this wonderful man, right, called Richard Dawkins. Now, I'd never heard of Richard Dawkins, and I thought they said Hawkins. Now, we all know who I thought she'd married, don't we? Do you know who I mean? Stephen Hawkins.
Yeah, Hawking, yeah.
So without really I know. I mean, so without really thinking, I couldn't help myself. I went, oh, how lovely. It's just, I'm a little, I just couldn't imagine Lala Ward marrying Stephen Hawkins, but I know they'll be really happy together. By which point, Matthew, who's never met me, is just like, what the? Right? And Peter Davidson's going, no, dear. Dawkins. So that was my first encounter with Matthew. But it's a hell of a visual. I still can't get it out of my head.
The very name of Lala Ward brings that picture into my head.
Me too. And I've had to tell Lala that story. I mean, I thought you'd married Stephen Hawkins, darling. I hate to say it or sound in any way wrong, but I'm frightfully glad you didn't.
I think our time is about up, right?
Oh!
That's about it for this one.
Plus, we've got to get to the bar, so.
Too right, yeah, they'll be running out of the wine. I'm going to get through 6 of them.
And you guys are here the rest of the weekend.
And I've got to go to bed. I'm afraid to say I have nothing left now, and thank you so much for being so lovely and patient with me over the last 2 days.
Ladies and gentlemen, Katy Manning and Matthew Waterhouse.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.